Good morning, everybody. This guy right here, Ray Flick Television beat writer for Bleeding Cool. This place I'm at is our satellite office in the Bronx, New York, where we're getting snow on April 2nd. Go figure. Welcome you back to Bleeding Cool's weekly recap and review of The Walking Dead Season 8. And we're going to be taking a look at last night's, or Sunday nights if you're watching this on Tuesday or Wednesday, because, again, we're always thinking about you. Still gotta mean something. And let me start off by saying that The Walking Dead's been on a bit of a run for the previous 2 weeks. We had the, I think it was the 12th, do my math right, 12th episode, which I thought really reminded everybody that The Walking Dead knows how to do action. Last week, I think we got a reminder that The Walking Dead knows how to do horror. And I think this week, we got a really strong reminder that they know how to do themes, characterization, and essentially the writers and the people behind the show, as they are in their 8th season, have really gotten to know these characters a lot. Softer, quieter episode in regards to no big, humongous things happening per se, but a lot of quiet, soft, but intense moments that really brought out a lot of characters, and it has me wondering where this Morgan situation is going to be going as we segue towards the April 15th Fear the Walking Dead crossover. But let me start off by giving you just a brief little recap. We had Carol and Morgan who are going out to go search for Henry, who is still missing. Carol's pretty much not too keen to actually initially want to go, and it leads to a very, I wouldn't say nasty, but a very hard truth conversation between her and Ezekiel, where Ezekiel basically calls her out and says, look, you told me all of this stuff to get myself back up and to fight the good fight again, and now you're not going to go out there, you're just going to sign yourself off to the fact that Henry's dead and things aren't going to go well, and essentially throws out the whole cowardice line, which cuts deep. I know I initially had a problem with it because we know Carol, we know everything that she's been through, everything like that. But then you wonder where it's going to go. So you have Carol and you have Morgan who are going out to go search for Henry. Now, they end up getting separated. One, because Carol pretty much tells Morgan, look, I'm primarily out here to make sure you don't go back crap crazy. Because Morgan, as we saw from last week's episode, is still continuing to have hallucinations and is still, we get to an understanding of where he's at in a minute. So they get separated. So Carol goes off looking for Henry. Morgan ends up stumbling upon Rick. And it turns out that they are both in the same kind of common area. They are looking for those leftover saviors. And through the course of their interactions, we get a sense of what's going on with Morgan. Morgan has now resigned himself that he's just some kind of angel of death. And by angel of death, what we mean is that he's just there to bear witness and see people die and see people leave. He's just sadly come to accept the tragedies and the hardships that he's had to deal with since he was first introduced on the show. That kind of fits into where Rick's at mentally, because Rick's mindset is, I'm going to go track some saviors and I'm going to go kill some escaped saviors. And that's exactly where Morgan's at. Unfortunately, the saviors get a jump start on both of them. Take them back to their place, they wake up, they see what's going on, and essentially you've got some saviors who are alive, some saviors who are dying. They're trying to figure out everything that's going on, and then I won't even say the guy's name because the character was such a D-bag, but the actor, again, fantastic. But the lead D-bag guy just is ready to just put Rick and Morgan down. But Rick and Morgan haven't been around this way a while. Rick does the great negotiating tactic, like, look, we don't have to do this. There's a better way. Come with us. Help us fight for the hilltop. Help us, fight back the saviors, and you have the chance, the potential for a future. And even Morgan owns up, like, to the idea of, like, hey, look, I was going to, I was here to kill you guys, but there's a herd of walkers that are coming in. They're going to take care of this stuff for me. This guy's giving you a chance, so you might as well take him up on it. So, of course, the herd of walkers come in, everything starts going crazy, the saviors realize, hey, let's go side with Rick and Morgan, let's go take all of them out, and they do, and then in one of the two most shocking moments of the episode, Rick then just turns on the saviors and just wholesale slaughters them. It's just like Quentin Tarantino, like, hey, thanks for your help, we're now going to put you down. Morgan takes it to the next level by tracking down D-Bag and doing, I guess, in a way, you could almost say a weird homage to what happened with Glenn, and with the idea of the revolving door and watching, yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this. I thought there was an interesting comparison there, and Morgan looking in the face of this D-bag as the walkers just, and Morgan's holding him at the gate, so the walkers can just rip him to shreds before Morgan finally lets him go. Yeah, we've got Morgan and Rick going just wholesale, full-sale slaughter on this. Now, going back to the Carol situation, Carol, with all of her doubt and all of her fears and everything else, they found Henry's stick. They find a bloody piece of his armor, for lack of a better phrase. But she finds Henry. Henry is essentially trapped and holed up against 3 walkers that are trying to get to him, and Carol kills the walkers, saves Henry, and brings him back to the kingdom, which is awesome. Morgan gets back and sees Henry too, and my thought and my hope was, oh my god, this is going to be the thing that kind of snaps Morgan around. It doesn't. It's just this, it's hard for Morgan to a concept for him to relate to. He was so ready for death that he seemed ill-prepared for Henry to actually be alive. And there's an apology moment, it's very sweet, where I feel like Morgan's looking for some kind of thank you from Henry and appreciation and celebration that Morgan had killed those saviors. And Henry just turns and apologizes to him. And you can see it's the one thing that probably hit Morgan the most of anything in this episode. This idea of like, no, you're supposed to accept that I killed them. That killing them is good. We get rid of bad guys. And this idea of Henry saying like, look, yeah, I'm sorry you had to kill these people. I'm sorry we've gotten to this point. And it highlights like where the contrasts are in this episode. Now, that's not just what we're going on. I'm going to obviously forget about Negan and Jadis. Negan and Jadis storyline, essentially, Jadis wanted Negan to see how much of her world was taken away and how much of it was shredded before she essentially set up some James Bond elaborate plan to kill him. Of course, Negan, people are saying talks his way out of it. I don't. I think Negan in his first moment of openness and realization starts telling him about his past, that Lucille's named after his wife, that he was no good to her. Essentially opening up to Jadis to make sure she sees, like, look, we're more than, we're resources. We're valuable. We mean something. We got to see also a little bit more into Jadis's world. Her storage cabin where she lives is almost like an alternate, like Rick and Morty dimension from like IKEA and Bed Bath & Beyond. And you see it represents and symbolizes everything about her psyche. Also, I got to say, Jadis rocking the flannel, the jeans with Lucille, looking pretty badass. I got to say, that's something to keep in mind for the future. And I'm still not moving away from the idea that Jadis is eventually going to be alpha if they do the Whisperer storyline. But let's just say Negan says to Jadis as a way of saying to us, he knows stuff is going bad. He knows there are people he can't trust. He knows things have gone horrible. And we see the first instances of Negan being truly apologetic, which I thought was a very opening stretch to his character. I think it just shows how great of an actor Jeffrey Dean Morgan is. And all in all, there are going to be, I'm going to talk about in a minute, some maybe issues I may have had with it. But their dynamic and where it led to, I thought was fascinating. The last thing I want to talk about is Rick and Carl, which you may be surprised. Carl died. Spoiler at this point. But Rick is finally getting around to reading the letter that Carl wrote him. And there's just some beautiful, quiet moments between Rick and Michonne as Michonne is trying to press the issue of him and the importance of him reading it without pressuring him to do it. And we see at the end the idea of Rick finally getting around to reading that letter from Carl and seeing what Carl has to say to him. And let me just say for the record, it's a beautiful moment towards the end between Rick and Michonne where Rick's apologizing to Michonne. And there's just a beautiful I love you moment back and forth. I'm a big Rick Michonne fan. I'm glad they made that change from the comic book. It just was a really, really nice touch. So, last plot line, I thought, again, people are thinking, well, Ray, why didn't you bring up the helicopter? The helicopter returned, and we see the helicopter is known by Jadis, who was flipping out because the one flare that Negan had ended up getting extinguished, so he essentially had to go. She was desperately trying to find another flare, but the helicopter left. My thinking is clearly this has got to be connected with Georgie and her crew in some manner, because they said they've been going out and checking out the different communities and the different towns that have set up and everything to kind of get a sense of who to trust and who not to. So I'm assuming they've been doing some kind of like heavenly helicopter post-zombie apocalypse, like Truman Show monitoring to see who they can trust. So I'm very curious to see where this goes going into season 9. I thought that was very, very interesting. And again, I think Negan's reaction pretty much respected what all of our reactions were when we first saw that. So that's a general recap. The episode itself, again, I thought was really quality and really strong on point because thematically I thought we touched upon things that we needed to see about our characters. Because I think the remainder of the season are going to be based on the decision-making between Carol, Morgan, Rick, and Negan. I think our season boils down to those 4 characters. Not that others aren't important. Not that Eugene, for example, is the ammo maker, is not going to be a player. But I think those 4 characters are our major players. The Carol and Morgan dynamic, I thought we saw a representation beautifully so of Carol seeing in Morgan what she could have become and trying to drag Morgan back from that. And we get Carol opening up a lot more about what Rick and the crew have done for her over these years, why she is so committed, and why she is where she's at. It's very important in that scene towards the end where she's talking with Ezekiel, where she owns up to Ezekiel and says, look, you're right, I was a coward. In this instance, I was a coward, and this is why, but I'm not a coward. And Ezekiel even says, like, there's a difference between an act of cowardice and being a coward. And he says, look, I was wrong. You are never a coward. But it's important to address the reasons and the hesitations and to not feed into the cynicism. The idea of hope versus feeding into the day-to-day cynicism, again, on display very much in this episode. We also, again, the Carol Ezekiel, I want to bring that Morgan and Ezekiel for Carol, I think, represent both sides, opposite ends of the spectrum of where she should be laying. And she's been 2, 3s, and 4s more towards Morgan. She's sit comfortably in 5, and I think she's drifting more 6 and 7 towards Ezekiel right now. I hope nothing happens to change that. With Rick and Morgan, we see long-lost friends, and there's an important moment where Morgan explains to Rick finally, why did you save me? And he says, because my son was watching. And I think Morgan has now, for Rick, become a cautionary tale of this is the road you can go down. This is what can become of you when you lose your son. Look at me and don't let that happen. So again, I think that dynamic is what led to Rick finally getting to reading the letter at the very end. Michonne, for everything she could do, could only get him so far. What happened with the Saviors and his experiences with Morgan and how that went was what finally got him over the goal line to really just be at a place where he could open himself up to Carl and what Carl's words had to say. Not that he doesn't already know, but to see them and to read them and to take them in is going to be a big, big difference. And the last dynamic, again, I thought Negan and the Jadis dynamic I thought was fascinating. This idea of Negan going with, no, I don't kill resources. Resources are too important. Excuse me. That resources are too important. Jadis took Negan's concept of resources and said, look, they're humans. Even resources is insulting. We're more than that. And it took Negan being strapped to a board and damn near killed by a walker in a very James Bond, slightly unnecessary manner. But I'm going to cut Jadis slack a ton because people seem to forget, short period of time, she just had a meat grinder all of her people for which she is blaming herself for their deaths in the first place. So I buy all of this, but we saw a humanizing of Negan that to be honest with you, he's not coming back the same from. I'm not saying the last 2 episodes we're not seeing a full build-up to all-out war, but I think where Negan goes moving forward with how he lays out the dynamic of the Saviors, I think is going to be dramatically different. And I think that's what I love about this episode overall. Our 4 main players, the ones I see that are going to be major factors, Carol, Morgan, Rick, and Negan, are going into our final 2 episodes in completely different places than how they started. And from a show and character development and what I'm looking for, that's what I want to see. The show has kept me guessing this season, especially this last 3-episode run, and I'm very impressed by it. From the dramatic acting standpoint and from overall how it's been fitting in the dynamic of the episode, I would give this episode a 7.5 to 8 on the Walking Dead meter on my John Cusack scale. So I'm very, very much excited for the episode. I hope you guys thought the same thing. If you didn't, if there's more you want to elaborate upon, if you think I'm just totally crazy, please let me know. Comment down below. If this is the YouTube page, you can also let me know on the post itself what you think about it. And thank you guys. We're going to have some Walking Dead stuff that's going to be coming up this week to promote Sunday's episode, which is called Worth, which is our penultimate episode. And then don't forget, April 15th, we're going to have a big Walking Dead live blog, maybe live stream, some type of thing going on, because we are going to have a massive night where it's going to be the Walking Dead Season 8 finale, Fear the Walking Dead Season 4 premiere. There's going to be, from what I understand, extra Talking Dead going on. We're going to have a lot of stuff going on. So that'll be April 15th, so please keep that in mind. But otherwise, this guy right here, Ray Flook, television beat writer for Bleeding Cool. Thank you guys for joining me for the Walking Dead review and recap. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're in the Northeast right now, enjoy the remaining hours of the snow. For everybody else, enjoy the start of your week, and we'll see you on bleedingcool.com. Take care, folks.